Other Record Labels is supported by Groover. If you're looking for a better way to get your artists heard by real curators, bloggers, playlist editors, and industry professionals, you have to check out Groover. Groover is a platform that connects artists and labels with real tastemakers who actually listen to your music and provide guaranteed feedback. Way better than sending mass emails and getting no responses. On Groover, industry professionals review your track and can offer playlist placements, professional feedback, sync opportunities, and more. Also, they've just got a brand new look, a cool rebrand that shows they're always improving and making it easier and better for artists to get heard. I've used Groover on the last few singles and albums I've put out. In fact, I discovered Groover through one of the labels I was chatting with on a Clarity call, someone in our community, a really, really great label. They told me that they use this tool called Groover to pitch their new singles, and that was how I first heard of them. If you haven't checked out Groover in a while, or you've never heard of them before, now is the perfect time. Head over to groover.co. That's groover.co to experience the new Groover and get your music in front of the right people. A huge thank you to them for supporting Other Record Labels and helping us bring you weekly episodes. Check the link in the description where I have a special discount code that you can use by going to groover.co. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr, and I guess I'm coming off a little hyper. That's okay. That's normal. I'll tell you why. I was just thinking, because I was listening to some clips of this episode before I record this intro, and I realized we've had a run of really great labels lately. And, they're not always household name labels. There may be, I would say for a lot of you maybe haven't heard of some of these labels we've had on this year so far, including today's label, but these are incredible labels, whether they're brand new or they've been around for 5 years or 15 years. There's just so much that these labels are doing well and that we can learn from these record labels. That's the origin of this podcast, which, by the way, is coming up. We are a week and a half away from our 7th birthday, 7 years. That's really incredible. And again, the origins was, here I am, discouraged, alienated with my own record label and feeling like other record labels are killing it and I want to learn from them. And we're still doing that 7 years later. And today's episode is a perfect example of that. High Tide Recordings. We are going to learn so much about merch. We're going to learn about vinyl. We love talking about vinyl. We're going to learn also about creating a music scene, creating a music community. If one in your city doesn't exist, that's on you to create it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about genres. I'm so excited for today's episode. I hope you enjoy it. This morning I went to your website and I was just like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. And then I was like, we're going to have a lot to talk about. And we are going to have a lot to talk about. But firstly, I want to talk about the two imprints, because that's where, a lot of record labels do things that are kind of confusing. It's not confusing to them, but it's confusing to the general public. This isn't one of them. When I got here, I kind of figured out what it was. And we had a label on just 2 weeks ago who's talking about doing something similar to what I think you guys are doing. So can you explain to me the two imprints? Are they brother and sister? Is it father and son, mother and daughter? Explain it to me a little bit, and how do they coexist?
They're definitely siblings more than anything else. But the High Tide Recordings label was born out of just necessity initially. We were doing event promotion and DJing a lot. And Vincent's band was doing some recording and writing. And in the end, it really was that we needed a home for his band's music. And a lot of record labels at the time were not looking to press vinyl. They weren't taking new bands on. It was at a time when record labels were kind of in this flux space, I would say, especially when it comes to surf music, which is where we began. The High Tide Recordings label was with that genre. It later expanded to lounge and exotica and just kind of this very transportive feeling. But that's where it began. And that was in 2016 at this point.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we're coming up on 10 years with the label.
Exciting.
So we were 2 years into our event that we do in Asbury Park. It started out it was called Asbury Park Surf Music Festival, and we later rebranded it to High Tide Summer Holiday after we started the label. So it's actually a little known fact that like the music event came before the label. The label was kind of built out of the music event because we would bring bands to Asbury Park, and then we would want to like one example is the Surferjettes, one of the earliest signings. Who's from Toronto, actually. Do you know the Surferjettes?
Not off the top of my head, but I don't get out. Cool. I don't get out very much.
That's all good. They're an all-girl surf group, all-women surf group from
Amazing.
Toronto. It's super cool.
Amazing.
They're doing really well right now. But
lots of surfing here in Toronto.
Yeah, totally. But they were one of the bands we brought down very early to the event, and we wanted to share their music with our friends, and share it online, and like all they had was like a CD that they were running to the post office like a couple times a week to ship out from Canada.
Yeah,
like a little an EP CD.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
So we were like, could we help you like get this on those streaming platforms? Do you want somebody to help you with mail order? And that was like the beginning of the High Tide label, and that was 2016.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you started with an event. That is really cool. I love like these different origin stories because everyone is slightly different. And then that fandom thing that you're referring to that's a very common story. It's something I've experienced as well, is seeing a band live and going, you need a record, and people need to hear that record.
Well, yeah, it's like you want to share the music with friends, and when there isn't a way to share that, it's like, oh, you have to go see them live. You have to buy the CD. A lot of the bands that we started with in the beginning didn't have music anywhere on streaming platforms. So that was a big part of like the earlier relationships that we had with the label, was just being the vehicle that helped them get there to share the music. And sorry, there's a train.
Apologies. We have a train track right there. So.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, we're just off the downtown Main Street in our town.
Okay.
But so the High Tide label, sort of quickly sort of cornered that entire surf music market, and not as like a nostalgia label. We weren't looking to repress records from the 60s. We were looking to bring current active bands to market, all the way to the point where in 2023, we released a new album from the Ventures, and pretty crazy to think like in 7 years, we went from like hand stamping our 45s on our kitchen table to, working with the top selling instrumental band of all time. So that was a pretty wild journey on the High Tide side. But Newtone
was funny because High Tide became this like very niche sound. We would get submissions for other bands, or we'd discover other bands that we loved and wanted to work with that had no label representation, but they didn't fit into those genres. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, Newtone was born out of a love for one band in specific. They're from Staten Island, the Jazztronauts. They are like the first band we signed. They're the first physical release we did with Newtone as an imprint, and it became this kind of evolving sound where we could just do this broader sound, and that even has found its kind of home in corners in a few different genres as well, but we're trying to keep expanding beyond like cinematic funk, soul, lounge, a little bit of R&B.
Let me ask you, just is the imprints divided by genre, would you say? Mostly, yeah.
And there is some crossover. Like there's a few artists that actually have released records on both sides.
Oh, cool.
One artist is Charlie and the Tropicals from New Orleans.
Okay.
He presented us a record in 2023, 22,
I think.
It was called Shake the Rum. It was very like tropical Caribbean. The artwork is incredible. And then his last record that he delivered to us was very like rock and roll, R&B, some cumbia stuff, calypso. We were like, okay, cool. This is more for the Newtone audience. So, but we promoted that one from both sides because there was some familiarity with Charlie on the High Tide side as well. But there's certain artists that like don't really make sense to the High Tide artists or to the High Tide audience at all. So we sort of, we don't want to compartmentalize any artist, but like if I'm promoting the charities to the Surferjettes fans, it's like, sometimes it doesn't make sense.
So is there also a divide between the two labels? And I love this. Like I do like this concept about, having an established label and then doing this as a way just not to turn away. Here's what I love about it. You're not turning away music that you love, which is important. And I know a lot of labels have to do that. But at the same time, I feel like you're not compromising this aesthetic that you built with High Tide. And that's what I'm kind of curious, like, were you just being protective of this? Maybe it was the audience or the brand. Because it would have been easier just to make it all under High Tide, but then you're going to dilute that.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, one of the comments we get a lot is about, the branding and the design work. And like, even early on, it's something we committed to. Like, even, there were events early on that would cost us money to put on because we had to pay the artist to, we'd spend all the money we would get paid on the event just on the poster. But it was important to us that everything we brought out, everything that we had our name on, like, looked great, and had a certain look to it. So
you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, and to this day, like, people will see new art that comes out and they can identify that it's something that we're putting our name on, which is good. I mean, it feels nice that, like, there's a recognition and there's a quality that's expected. It's not just the visuals, but it's also the sound. It's really the whole package. And so I would say it's definitely like aesthetics that are important, but it's the sound, and it's definitely the way we've tried to, like, keep High Tide.
Yeah, the sound thing is important to mention as well, because like early on, we'd have artists deliver us records that, they mastered it themselves, using GarageBand or Logic. And we were like, look, like, we want to spend some money to get this mastered professionally. And, they trusted us enough that it was like worth that investment, but that, everything that came out, especially with the early High Tide stuff, it sounded loud, it sounded punchy, it sounded modern. And like, it started to stand out above, what was currently out there. And like, we still try and, make sure everything we do on both sides looks and sounds great.
Well, because especially with New Tone, but the people who are fans of this music are fans of music in general and are fans of, like, the sound, and that sound is pretty important. And some of the stuff, some of the classic recordings going back, is very analog. And so I would imagine a select number, especially vinyl fans of your audience, are pretty particular about quality of records and quality of recordings.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's interesting too, because both sides kind of have these like vintage roots, if you even just look at our most recent releases on both sides, right? We have the Surfers from Poland, who are incredible. Sounds like such
a traditional surf sound. It's really amazing.
Sounds like it could have been recorded in 1962. It's unbelievable. And then you have, the McCharmleys, who recorded with Anthony Messino at, Daptone West, Penrose Recorders. Wow. And, everything's kind of like analog and mono, and, there's a sound to it. So it's funny that like both sides kind of have this like appreciation for the sounds of the past, but it is distinctly current. It's not a nostalgia label either of them.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Okay, more questions about these two branches, because first of all, 2016 for High Tide. What was the year for New Tone?
2022. Yeah.
Okay. So a bit
when
of
we like cemented that.
Okay, so a little ways into it. Okay, what was we were talking about this on a previous episode. For folks who are listening, will have heard this conversation, not this conversation, but the other conversation I'm referencing 2 weeks prior to this conversation. So that's interesting that we're talking about these dual imprints from one label. But you go to hightiderecordings.com, which I suggest everyone does, just to see how to make a gorgeous record label website. But you go to this site, and on the top you see High Tide, New Tone. They are equal. You have New Tone records there. So probably very early on, you decided we're promoting these to the same audience. It's just very clear that choose your own adventure, right? If you want to go more surf, or you want to go more of the Motown sound. Is that true?
I like that. Yeah, and I mean, honestly, it started that way, but it's also a funny thing that now, the further we get into New Tone, the orders that we get through the shop are very much combined. We'll see these really funny mixes of things like Boogaloo Assassins and Slowey and the Boats and the Surfers 45 as a pre-order with like, I don't know, the charities. So like Sweet Soul and Surf combined. I mean, so it's like, it is this music discovery that's happening on the website, which initially was not the case. And I think that it's been a newer trend that we're seeing a lot more crossover, which is exciting.
It's awesome. And I've talked so much about the idea of having a niche, whether that's a niche sound or a niche aesthetic or a niche mission statement or all of those combined ideally, just so that when somebody comes to your website, I mean, the New Tone, the logo, High Tide, the logo, already it speaks to an era. Just the way it's designed, you kind of have an idea. This is not going to be like futuristic electronic music. You already have a sense. And then same with the artwork and the 7 inches. And so that, to me, I think that's really important. But then what do you do if you want to branch out from genres? Because a lot of people say, well, I want to do a niche. I know that's important and it makes it easier for fans to understand what you do, but I don't want to limit myself. And I feel like the way you guys have done it is just, okay, we're doing 2 niches from the same label. I love that. Another question about the formats. Is there a format difference? Like I'm seeing the New Tone stuff looking a little bit more of the jukebox 7-inch style.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually going to bring that up too. It's so High Tide started with largely 7-inch releases. That's like, that was the main thing in the beginning. And we sort of started to discover that the audience that we had for the label was looking for more full-length albums. They wanted the LP. So we have a lot of 7 inches that exist. That's part of the catalog. But definitely LPs are where High Tide shines. That's where a lot of people tend to gravitate. New Tone, interestingly, we started the other way around. And now we're doing more 7 inches than we were in the beginning. And that crowd is a little more like 7-inch friendly, a little more DJ oriented. And I think like some of it is also the changing landscape in the way that people are purchasing music and the way music is being released in like a singles way versus LPs and full lengths. So we're kind of, I don't know, I would say that we're making shifts and we're kind of seeing, I don't know, how albums are built a little bit differently these days. And some of that starts with singles and then leads to full length.
I think some of it also is in reference back to, you know, the roots of the styles that we're doing. Like, yes, there was definitely, you know, in the late 50s, early 60s, there was definitely a good amount of, you know, surf music being sent to radio and being sent to retail on 7-inch. But like the LP was a very, you know, it was a thing. And, you know, the art, especially once we started getting into like the exotica world, like if you look at some of the exotica releases, the Manicoras, the Tiki-Aki Orchestra, like exotica, you know, people would buy an exotica record having no idea what it sounds like simply because of the art, you know?
Yes.
And, you know, the Manicoras in particular is one that like, you know, we pressed that band on that record. We were like, look, like, it has to look great. And we spent, you know, I think we spent $1,200 on that art all in. And the record, but the record crushed. So like, you know, especially once we started getting into the exotica world, we started really focusing on album covers and like design treatments for those records.
Oh my gosh.
But like, you know, on the New Tone side, it's like, you got a lot of people that just are used to, you know, digging in dirty, you know, 45 dusty bins and looking for old soul 45s or old funk 45s. So we just wanted to like sort of show up with the aesthetic that our people were looking for on both sides.
Oh my gosh, that's so wise. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, I'm such an advocate for art, but just to kind of like think about what it is that people are looking for. And so this $1,200 record, this $1,200 artwork, I would imagine that great artwork would have contributed to the sales.
Oh, I mean, the album is amazing, but I honestly believe that, you know, when people saw what it looked like, and honestly, that was like a very, it It was very close to the pandemic when we put that one out. It was like
Okay.
2021, I want to say, or 2022.
Yeah, we were like in it. We were in it.
Yeah.
And like that band was developing during the pandemic. And honestly, the pandemic was really good for High Tide. You know, I hate to say that, but like when people were stuck at home, they loved getting an exotica record in the mail or a surf record in the mail. It felt like they were on a little vacation.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I honestly do believe that like, for an LP specifically, like art is, you know, the music can be great, but if it looks terrible, it's not gonna sell. You can have a record that looks great and the music maybe isn't as good, but it'll still sell because it looks weird. I hate to say it, but
and it's like hanger appeal. You go into a store and you see something that could be like beautifully made, but it looks awful on a hanger. Like it's not appealing. You don't want to try it on.
Yeah.
It's the same idea with this. You see these records on a shelf and you are intrigued and you want to pick it up and you want to like dive deeper and experience it. And that is definitely like a big part of what we do here.
And we also recognize that like, you know, starting a record label in 2016, you know, all of our friends and family are like, really? Like you're going to leave your corporate job and do a record label? Like, what are you thinking?
They still probably think that.
Yeah. And, you know, we both worked for like a big corporation and left to do this. And like, I think, in order to stand out, like you can't just say like we're just going to release great music. Like there's a lot of great music out there, but it has to look good too. You know, it's very important.
I hope people are listening and letting that sink in, because I've been preaching it from the rooftops, but it's still, people don't get it. People won't invest and won't, you know, give it what it deserves. Listen,
I'll say it's a place that a lot of people think they can cut corners. They're like, I'm gonna have my significant other do the art, and it's like just do it right all the way through, you know?
Yeah. It is not an afterthought. It has, I mean, you can let your significant other do the art if you let your significant other sing vocals on the record. Did you let your significant other mix the record? You know what I mean? Like that's, we wouldn't do that with the music. We shouldn't do that with the art, in my opinion, in our opinion. Let's define, can you define exotica? Not for me as a genre, of course I know, but I'm talking about our foolish, uninformed, unevolved audience who don't know what the genre exotica means. Please, can you enlighten us? I've never heard of that before.
It's sort of, you know, had its roots in, you know, the 50s. It's sort of that post-war escapist sound that was really largely based on jazz. Mm-hmm. And, you know, jazz musicians started including like, you know, percussion from, you know, the South Pacific. You know, a lot of inspiration came back, you know, from the World War II. And, you know, you saw that sort of like tiki explosion in Southern California, Don the Beachcomber, Trader Vic doing those tropical drinks. And that was a huge thing. And like the music was just sort of a thing that coincided with that world. And also, you know, sort of actually made its way to Hawaii as well and sort of blended with the traditional Hawaiian sounds. But,
okay.
Yeah.
You also might find like soundscapes that are in there too. So you've got bird calls and you've got water feature. Like there can be sometimes this like undercurrent within the music that's all woven together. It just feels very transportive.
If you're looking for like places to start, I'd look into Martin Denny, Exotica. I'd look into Les Baxter, you know, some of the earlier stuff.
Did Herb Alpert do some of that stuff?
Say it again?
Herb Alpert, was he doing any of that at the time? Because I know he would incorporate like world sounds and stuff.
You know, it's funny. It's like every trend, the musicians, I think Herb Alpert came a little bit later than like the Exotica trend. Like I think Martin Denny Exotica was like 58, if I recall.
Oh, okay.
So it was like real early. And but it's funny, like you know, at the time, like every major musician, as soon as there was a trend, it was like, I'm going to do a record like that. You know, I don't think Herb Alpert ever got full on Exotica, but I'll say like we throw some Herb Alpert 45s into our DJ sets once in a while. It works.
It's like dancier. Yeah. Sometimes Exotica can be like very mellow. There's definitely some very slow, very background noise vibes, but then there's some dancier stuff. There's just like a lot of interesting things that you can hear.
Like one modern cultural reference that I can point to is that if you're watching Severance at all,
of course,
there's a ton of Exotica and Severance.
Oh, okay.
And
I have
all
noticed.
That kind of quirky, like groove based, like upright bass grooves with some percussion over top. Like that's all like. That all has roots in like late 50s, early 60s Exotica music.
Yeah, don't spoil this week's episode, please. But yes, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I kind of, I mean, there's so many different titles for like what for a time was called like world music, like where people would just, American musicians or British musicians would borrow, like you said, instruments or sounds from around the world. And, it's interesting. There was a genre that popped up on Bandcamp, and I wonder if it's more from like a Japanese audience, but I saw the genre like resort music or like resort or like spa music. And it's kind of like hotel lobby music basically, or like if you were to go on holiday somewhere and there's music playing in the lobby or in the spa or by the pool, and I was really turned on by that sound, because for some reason you always feel good listening to whatever you're listening to on a holiday. And anyway, I'm excited to check out.
There's a lot of that. I was just watching a funny like Instagram video today that was like, a lot of people that listen to that kind of music, they almost like they just put on like playlists, and it's like just the style. And if you were to ask them like, tell me an artist you like,
sure,
like, they don't even really know.
Yeah.
But I will say there's a label that we really like. It's called Cold Busted. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
But Cold Busted does a ton of cool like instrumental lo-fi hip hop stuff. But I would say, if you're looking for a label that is showing up with a lot of stuff like what you're talking about, but it has a bit of a hip hop sensibility to it, check out Cold Busted. Really, they have a 45 series called Jet Set, and it's all based on like travel themes. It's very cool.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on because there's so much that we have to talk about here. This is like, let's talk a little bit about the genres, because it is a lot of instrumental stuff. And I wanted to know like, what are your parameters? And also going back to these two labels, like what do they share aside from being run by you and are basically a reflection of your, how wide your taste palette goes, but what kind of commonalities do these two labels share, and really how are you kind of defining these genres and then trying to stay within these parameters?
These are good questions.
So wait, can you break down the first part of the question for me real quick?
Okay, you're right. Let's talk about
the genres.
Let's talk just about these two, going back to these two labels for a second. What do they share in common, in your opinion?
I mean, I think that one of like the common threads with a lot of what we do is it's very much when you listen to it, you're not getting a feeling that you are like here and now. You are somewhere else. Yeah. So it's very like, I've said it already, the transportive element, but it does feel like when you are listening to bands from either label, I think that there is some aspect of taking you elsewhere. And I think it could be like a dimly lit cocktail bar. It could be a tropical beach. It could be on a boat. It could be like on a ferry, going to the city. But like there's an element of just like going somewhere. I don't know if you,
or like a night out. I think like with with New Tone specifically, it's like, we released some salsa music, and it's like, are you in like a sweaty sweaty club in Miami? Or like with the Charities, like, are you like under a disco ball, like dancing with, slow dancing with someone special? But yeah, I mean, the high tide stuff, transporting you to, the North Shore of Hawaii or, wherever, there's definitely like a transportive element to it. I would agree. I would also say there's a big focus on physical media with these labels, both sides. Yes. There's many labels that are like, well, streaming is, our main revenue source, and we do some physical. And it's like, I barely even pay attention to the streaming revenue, to be honest. Like it's cool. And like, Spotify and Apple Music, I see those largely as just like, a modern listening station in a record store,
Oh,
like,
good point.
I remember going to a record store and seeing like Weezer Blue and being like, that looks cool. And I'm going to put my headphones on and, listen to one or two songs and then spend $6 on the cassette. And like, I see Spotify as that. I hope it's inspiring enough that somebody will go to our website or go to a show and pick up the physical media. So for us, the focus is like, sure, go stream it. Love that. You know, Spotify editors, if you're listening, feel free to add us to your playlist. But, you know, we don't put all of our energy into that. We'd rather get the vinyl into people's hands because, you know, for me, when we get a shipment of vinyl, I just think, man, there's 1,000 more things that are going to live on, you know, that represent everybody involved in this project for way longer than we are, you know?
Well, and that's why I have no problem putting $1,200 into artwork because of how long it should live on. And that people are going to see the spine of that record more than they're going to hear it. They're going to see the artwork, you know, for decades. With respect to physical, I'm just curious, not saying this is a thing at all. I didn't get a chance to go deep on your store, but is there a place for CDs or cassettes at all, or is this audience vinyl?
We do have a place for CDs and cassettes. Cassettes are like a bit of a newer thing for us. We did it with the McCharmleys debut LP with the album, and that's been a fun project. We both enjoy the cassette thing, and we also recognize that there is a part of the audience that loves the music, but they listen to it only on CD. So we were kind of strictly vinyl for years, and certain bands had the audience for CDs, so we would press those when they were touring and whatnot. We're introducing it a little bit more because I think that there is a little bit of a nostalgia for it right now, and we're seeing that with cassettes. So we're trying to lean into offering a few more formats for just kind of, I don't know. Again, it's like a choose your own adventure sort of thing. You could go either way.
The problem is go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, you know, writing a label's fun, you know, it's stressful, but it's also fun because you get to just like sort of, you know, cater to your own tastes. And like I love vinyl, but like, you know, I've recently gotten really back into CDs. And like only because, you know, so at my age, there's this valley that exists for vinyl production. It was like late 80s, early 90s. There were like barely anything was even being released on vinyl. And if it was, like, just as an example, right? One of my favorite records, Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. I want to say like maybe they pressed 500 copies of that when it came out. And if you remember how big that band was, you know, so when I owned it first on cassette. I remember the little O-card double cassette, and I owned it on CD. And like then that was like the time when like album art was optimized for those formats, for CDs specifically. And like when I think of Melancholy, I think of the double disc, you know, with the 2 booklets, clear as day. And like I could go try and find a Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness reissue that's remastered with new art for $100, or, you know, I could just go find the CD for $6 and it's got the original art. And you know, so a part of me is like kind of in for that era of music. I'm sort of getting nostalgic for CDs again, and like if I like CDs, I'm going to put CDs out because that's fun to do. The
biggest challenge with that, though, is that you're then dealing with, all right, now we need art for an LP, we need art for a CD, and we need art for a cassette. So it's funny that you ask, because we've got like a sheet of paper over there where we're like working on layout for,
and they're all different.
CD that's already been out on vinyl and cassette, and now we need like a whole other layout for the CD. So it's just like a funny.
It's an added cost, and they're all completely different. I mean, there's a little bit of similarities between vinyl and CD, a little bit, but you know, with the cassette, things get really crazy.
Yeah.
Well, there are certain, you know, I would say the High Tide audience is, you know, possibly a touch older than the New Tone audience, and I think the High Tide audience appreciates the CD thing a bit more. And then, you know, the New Tone audience, I think, is more of a vinyl, and like, you know, we're starting to infuse some cassettes into that as well.
Yeah.
So
I think I think New Tone in general has like a younger audience, which probably contributes to that. And I appreciate it. I don't know. It's kind of fun to do something a little bit different, something that we were like, no, we're never going to do CDs. And
well, it's good that you're being open-minded to what the audience wants, because I mean, tapes, I think, makes the least amount of sense for what you're doing, because tapes weren't around really in the 50s and 60s. So that's not, it doesn't connect me. When I look at the 7-inch or the 45s you guys have, I know what that sounds like already, but this music didn't have a heyday on cassette.
Well, what's funny is there is a strong connection on the high tide side with CDs because of the Pulp Fiction era in the 90s.
Okay.
Like Pulp Fiction is sort of considered like third wave of surf. You know, the first wave being like early 60s. There was a like late 70s, early 80s wave as well. You know, like John and the Night Riders, and then like Dick Dale being in the opening scene of Pulp Fiction just blew that open. And like anybody that was an adult at the time, like has the Pulp Fiction soundtrack on CD. And there's like there's this CD nostalgia, you know, this CD connection that audience has for sure.
The CDs I'm watching so closely, and I grew up with CDs, and you know, you're kind of like I've been trying to, I got rid of half of them. The other half are in the basement, and I refuse to get rid of them because I know they're coming back. But at the same time,
I'll buy them from you.
At the same time, I really am not ready for them to come back. Although there's these great Japanese players that are all clear. They're gorgeous players. And I'm thinking about getting one for home, just because I don't think CD players aren't sexy right now in the same way that turntables and cassette players. Anyway, I'm reluctant for the CDs to come back. I was okay with them leaving, but the way you kind of shared your story, now I'm like, oh, I could get into that. That's like my gateway is like nostalgia to like opening the CD, praying that the hinges don't snap off, you know?
Right.
And those double discs were terrible because like tray cards would always shatter. But anyway,
don't get me wrong. A new album, like would I buy the CD? Like for example, one of the records I love, you know, from 2024 was The Cure. You know, songs for a Lost World and or songs from a Lost World, songs for a Lost World.
Yeah.
But I bought the vinyl and the cassette of that record.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't buy the CD, but you know, for me, like I said, if it came out in like 91 to like 90 to like 2000,
there is a
chances are you can't find that vinyl, you know, at all if it was even pressed. And like, I don't want to pay hundreds of dollars or buy a reissue. I want the original thing, you know. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I actually have a huge fascination for that era of early 90s, early 2000s, that gap year for vinyl. And there are just horrendous versions, like original pressings that were pressed for countries that hadn't moved to CD yet or to cassette. And so it's fun to find those in rough shape. And then for the most part, labels are just slowly catching up to reissue those on vinyl. It's fun to watch that, especially just because that's my era.
Yeah, totally. And you know, I'm not saying reissues are bad. I just, you know,
when they're not done well and they're expensive, that's always hard to
well,
pay
it's
for
like
that.
just like for example, this like I'll bring the Smashing Pumpkins again, like Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. Just give me the original art, you know, and maybe it's like a licensing thing or something.
Oh,
like,
did they reissue it with different art? I wasn't following.
Yeah. It's a remaster, and it's got like this like reimagined artwork, which is, you know, it's cool art, but like I just want the original, you know, and it's like, I'd buy that if they put that out, but
maybe they're not trying to sell it to you; they're trying to sell it to a new generation. I don't know.
Hey, have you guys ever
just listen to the cassette? Then it's fine.
Have you guys ever done the cassette thing where talking about repurposing your art, where instead of like doing a vertical design, you just did the LP cover in as a square, and then underneath is like black. And like,
that's what we did.
That?
I'll find you one.
Please do. Yeah. I love that. I'm nostalgic for that.
We did that for the McCharmleys. It was funny. We sent it to the designer, and she's the one that sent that back to us. We actually there it is. What do you think of this? I thought maybe the old approach would be cool.
Yeah, that Atlantic Records, all right? They used to do they used to do them that way, which is funny because it's just laziness. They were just lazy. They're like, how quickly can we get this out?
So that being the cover of this record, like, how could you have even achieved that fully vertical, you know? Like,
a photo.
We didn't have a photo that made sense for that.
Yeah. Our poor podcast listeners here are having a hard time, but I completely, I mean, everybody knows that's, I love that. Yeah. I haven't actually personally haven't done it because I've designed most of my own album covers, so I've been able to recreate a vertical version. But I am nostalgic for that approach.
I think what that was based on was like cassette was sort of this new format, and like they were probably putting things out on cassette that had previously been out on LP, and it was just like, let's just get
quick.
It out, you know?
It's quick. Yeah, exactly.
That was actually the case with this McTarmley's record, so that's why we just did it that way.
You guys were just lazy.
Otherwise,
it was profit driven.
Yeah, like if it had been from the beginning, it would have been just a very different thing where it's like, okay, we know, but we need the CD format, we need the vinyl format, we need the cassette format. Like we need 3 versions of the art, adaptable to all of them.
But it's fun. Like Big Crown put out the Heart Tones last year, brand new band. The record's amazing.
Yeah.
And same thing. It's like literally looks like an Atlanta. It's got a big bold red spine. It's just like great.
Yeah. Hey, Scott here. I'll get you back to the episode in just a second, but I wanted to let you know, if you're listening to this and going, you know what? I've been thinking about starting my own record label. I think now is the time. I'm hearing all these people who are just like me, who are doing it and are having fun. Maybe I should as well. Come over to our website, otherrecordlabels.com, where I just continue to collect all of these resources. Most of these resources are free that you can download, including our record label toolkit. And so to grab that, all you have to do is to go to otherrecordlabels.com/toolkit, and you can download our record label toolkit that includes tons of resources like templates and checklists and a record label budget and so much more. Go to otherrecordlabels.com/toolkit. Now back to the interview. I want to go back to talking about instrumental music, because this is a conversation we've had many times with labels on here who have a significant amount of instrumental music, whether that's ambient music or classical or piano music. Just this idea. I mean, when I went to your website to listen to some things, I went to a playlist, and the playlist had a description, and it was basically like, if you're going to the beach, if you're having a barbecue. I want to ask you about using music being a utility for listeners. And I get that impression from your label a little bit, where these records are for when people come over in the summer, and this is for a backyard party, this is for a day at the beach, it's for, there's just a certain, you guys were talking about these applications for your music. Is that not, does that not diminish the creative, what the artist has done from a creative standpoint? Do the artists create this music like this to be almost background music? I'm just curious about that. And I don't know where I sit on that, but as a music fan, I really, really appreciate music that underscores moments in my life. And I do not think any less of that band than, let's say, a pop artist.
Well, I like the underscore element, because I think that it does turn like the experience of listening to it into more of a soundtrack to what's happening in the moment. And I don't think our bands largely are going into it with that intention necessarily. I think some of it is just it's a passion for the sound and the style. It's not something we're asking for either, but we also, with our DJing, initially it was all surf lounge exotica, and that's kind of where the High Tide transition came in with the label. We would be DJing at restaurants or a cocktail bar, and it was very much creating a background soundscape for the dining parties and people sitting at the bar. You could still have a conversation, and it also then didn't kind of dictate what the feeling in the room should be. There's no lyrics to tell you how you should be, feeling or what you're thinking about. Is I like that about your own experience.
And I'll just say, I'm glad you used the word soundtrack, because the playlist you're referencing is our greetings from High Tide Recordings. I think it says recommended for secret surfing spots, backyard barbecues, and dimly lit cocktail bars. And to me, think about the idea of you and some friends going to a secret surfing spot, and if you're putting on that playlist, is it in the background? Probably not. It's probably very much a part of that experience.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
For me, music is never background. It's very important. It's very important what is on to color the moment with music. And I think that instrumental music is a little easier to sometimes highlight. Having a conversation over top of it, but to me, it in no way diminishes the significance of the music and like being a part of special moments for people. So
yeah.
That's a good point. And there's times when you're having a party, you're having people over, you're doing something, and somebody says, somebody put some music on, please. Like it's definitely, it can be in the foreground. In fact, when I have a couple over, like when we have a dinner party, my wife and I, and we have another couple come over, after dinner, we sit in the living room. I'll always put a record on, usually a jazz record or some sort of classic record.
Yeah.
And it appears that I'm putting that on as background music while we talk and have wine. But truthfully, it's for me to listen to while everyone else talks, because just in case the conversation's boring, I at least have a great record I'm listening to.
Oh man.
I mean, I like that. It's a good idea. But also I feel like I don't know. I think Vincent and I probably, when we walk into a friend's house and there's no music on,
yeah,
it's like a little, it like makes us maybe a little anxious. It's kind of like music is this like calming presence for us. It's something that's always on in our house, whether it's vinyl or we're streaming something, it's a part of the day to day. So when we walk in somewhere and there's nothing, it's like,
yeah.
Okay, it feels like pressure.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true.
So I like we do the same thing. People come over, we put a record on, we sit in the front room. Like that's the vibe.
Yeah,
that's the vibe.
That's the vibe. Yeah, no, it's true. I it is awkward when there's no music playing, because then you have to talk.
And I think it's okay to recognize that like not all music serves every function and in every situation. Like I have friends that like this week are just blasting the new Lady Gaga single on repeat on the way to work, and that's cool. I don't expect you to do that with the new Tailspins single. Like that's fine, but like after dinner, if you're having some drinks with some friends and you put the Tailspins record on, like that's gonna be perfect, and you're gonna like remember that record as a part of that moment. So I think it's okay that like we kind of we create music that like kind of weaves into people's lives versus maybe is like in the very forefront all the time.
What about sync? Let me ask you about sync, because when we talk about quote unquote underscores, background music, instrumental music, I feel like this stuff is super sync friendly. Is that part of your strategy?
Yeah, we recently linked up with Bank Robber Music.
Okay.
Who is, them?
Yep. Yeah, they represent a lot of labels that we've had on here.
Yeah, they're in New Jersey, so they're local to us.
Oh, cool.
And we're starting to kind of get a nice cadence going with them, and we're starting on the New Tone side, especially. Like anytime anyone delivers us masters, we just make sure there's an instrumental version as well. And we've had some cool placements. I will say, the whole like writer's strike thing like really brought the sync market to a halt for sure.
Sure.
And it hasn't really recovered
from
what we've seen. There's a lot of AI music being made. There's a lot of, just kind of like, sound-alike stuff being made. So, and like in our world too, especially on the high tide side, there's a decent amount of covers that happen, like Charlie and the Tropicals is an artist that I mentioned. His entire last two records is all like obscure, like 1930s and 40s, calypso songs. And it's like, some of the stuff would be a little difficult to get, the publishing approval on.
Oh, I see.
So that is a little bit of an obstacle, but yeah, I mean, we've had a good amount of sync activity, and the Bank Robber people are always out there hustling it for us. So we appreciate that, but we also recognize that there's a lot of competition in that world. So it's not something we like bank on necessarily. It's sort of like extra frosting if we layer it on.
Well, it's good that you think that way, actually, because I mean, and one day something big and huge will come along, and it'll, you won't get another one like it for a couple of years, but and then other times it'll just kind of trickle in. It's just nice to have it there.
I'll say we just sort of like base and this might be like naive, but we base our business on, physical media and, designing cool merch and almost being a bit of a lifestyle brand in some ways. Yeah. Like sync is something you can't control. Streaming is something you can't control, but I can control creating a cool shirt and like hoping that people, want to own it because spring's coming up. Like that's a little more controllable for me. So
yeah.
Well, this is a great segue because I want to ask you about your record label merch. You do have record label merch in your store, and it's very common to see labels say, okay, we need merch. And so we have a logo. Whether that logo is cool or not is oftentimes it's subjective, but it's like they just slap their logo on a t-shirt, and the t-shirt is just a basic t-shirt. It's not cut nicely. It's not a great color. I know a lot of labels do that, and I kind of feel like don't do that. Don't feel like you have to do merch. To me, I'm only attracted to merch that would look cool in a shop, like a cool clothing store in the mall or a cool clothing brand online. If I go in there, H&M always has like fake record label hoodies or like fake company t-shirts that they actually look cool, even though they'll disintegrate in a couple of weeks in the dryer, but like they look cool. And so I kind of wish that like labels would do that more. Your stuff looks really cool. It's great. It's just great. The material looks good. The colors are nice. You have a lot of different types of logos. It's not just the logo that would be on the label of the vinyl, but like actually some bespoke stuff. So talk to me a little bit about your strategy for doing label merch. Because remember, it's like some people don't care about record labels. They just want the music. So it's like, why do I want to wear your stuff? So can you just walk me through this a little bit, and what type of role does merch play in your overall business model? Because you do have a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Too much.
We have too much fun with merch. I don't know. Some of it's like we want it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like a funny thing that's definitely a bit of a trend with us, is that there's some things that come up and are made because of selfishness, like we want them ourselves.
That's totally fine.
And then we decide to make them available to the public. But the design thing is kind of funny, and a lot of the designs that we actually have merch-wise are specific merch projects. They are not artists that we work with on art for actual records. Interestingly.
Okay. Oh, very cool. Okay.
They're very much like apparel. It's like an apparel line.
That's smart. Yeah.
Well, there's a few layers to it, I think. Number one, with the roots of the label being a music event.
Mm-hmm.
Asbury Park Surf Music Festival started out in 2014. We were at the old school Asbury Lanes in Asbury Park, which is like a block from Asbury Park Beach. And like, I think when we started out, it was like we would create like merch. We curated like a little tiki bar within the bowling alley, and all that like was very much like there was like a merchandising element to all of it. So when we started the label, it was like, but I also think like in order to grow, like you can't just only present yourself to people that already know you. And I think like a lot of what we do with our merch projects is like we work with artists that will show us to their audience. Like one example is Dr. Wolfenbergen from Philadelphia. If you're looking at our site, his most recent shirt that we did was called Aloha Partner. It was right. Like it was inspired
like Western Skull.
It was inspired by the Slowing in the Boats album that we did. It was like a Western swing record, and like it's like this skull with a cowboy hat and like but like Dr. Wolfenbergen, he's in Philadelphia, which is a cool kind of regional partnership, but like he has a huge following, right? And whenever we do a project with Dr. Wolfenbergen, he shares the project, and like 70,000 people on his Instagram see High Tide Recordings. So for us, some of it is about just like the collaborative aspect of like working with different artists so that we can, get exposure to different audiences that isn't just the same people that already know us.
Well, and he's a fun one because he will like email us out of the blue and just say, hey, it was kind of like working on some sketches.
Yeah.
Started doing this one and it felt like you. So like, let me know if you want to roll with it. Or we'll also send an email with like a ridiculous idea and just be like, let us know what you think. Like, I don't know. And then he'll send a sketch back and be like, I love this.
Yeah.
So it's this very fun, quirky relationship we have with him that I think people have also really gravitated towards that art. They've just been really into it. We started introducing like more colors with it, and so they're high-end designs. They're not just like one color. They're like impactful. It's something you'd wear on vacation. You would take it on a cruise ship, or you'd go to Florida and you'd wear it at the beach, or, you know, it's like, I guess that kind of thing. But also you were talking about just like the broader reach. We also see this stuff as like little billboards. So there are other ways to introduce people to the label.
Well, it's very...
We also have a love for like these like sort of kitschy like souvenir style.
Okay.
Like another artist that we work with is Gray Haas, also from Philadelphia. And like just as another example of an event tie-in, you know, we did a high tide winter holiday in Pittsburgh, which COVID kind of killed. It hit like 3 weeks before COVID, and then we couldn't do it for 2 years. But, man. Like the whole sort of format of that was that it was like a winter like tiki skiing, like a ski lodge.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And one of the merch items was like the High Tide Skiing Club, and it came with a pin and like a membership card, and like it was fun. We also did High Tide Swim Club last year for summer holiday, which was like a comfort color shirt, and that also came with like a little like lifeguard kit. So it's just fun to like do like souvenir style merch. I mean, we could put the High Tide logo on everything, but for us it's just more fun to do like souvenir style cool stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good. And it's good business for you?
Yeah, I mean it makes us more than just a record label. I think there's people that you know, they enjoy the music for sure, but there's also people that like we know for a fact don't listen to the music, that just buy the shirts because they like the shirts.
Well, I hear exactly what you're saying, and to be honest, that was kind of a dumb question, because there is this halo effect that you guys have been talking about with the merch, where it's walking billboards, it's reaching these other artists, reaching their social media. It's probably great fodder for your own social media to be showing these shirts online. It makes, you know, now when people go to your website and they go to your shop, they're going to spend an extra 2 minutes there because they've spent a couple minutes looking at the music and then the events, and now they're taking time on the store. I'm sure there's a lot of cool like promotions you can do to give it away to sexy Canadian podcasters, for example. But you know, throwing them, I imagine there's times where like if you mess up an order, you can give them a free t-shirt. There's just a lot of things that you can do when you have products like this, that halo effect.
I think some of it is like just the old school marketing mentality of like word of mouth, and like when you order from us, you get matchbook. Like we even make business cards. We just have matchbooks, you know, like they literally High Tide Recordings and New Tone matchbooks, and like you get swag, and you know, we make glassware, and we figure like it's very interesting. Like we have Christmas glasses every year in January. There's this huge rush on High Tide Christmas glasses because people had the High Tide glasses for their Christmas cocktails, and their friends and family probably saw them. We're like, I don't have cool Christmas glasses.
I need them.
And we get a ton of orders for like Christmas glasses in January because people just saw them from like new people.
We have a Halloween themed one. We did like, you know, we've done some really cool ones. It's like and again, like going back to working with artists that want to share the work.
So cool.
It's just a fun way to collaborate with an artist, and then their audience sees it too, which maybe wouldn't have known about the label otherwise.
Like running a Facebook ad is necessary, but I'd rather somebody hear about us from a cocktail glass or a matchbook than a Facebook ad. You know, that's just me.
Yeah, that's a good point. This segues nicely into the fact that you guys are opening or have opened a retail store. I mean, it seems like you like making things and selling things. So tell me a little bit about the impetus of that retail store. And now I'm kind of interested, is it a High Tide Recordings like storefront, or is it a record store?
A little bit of both.
It's gonna be a hybrid.
Okay.
Initially we needed to be like moving production and, you know, shipping in stuff out of our house, and we got a great little office space that's in the downtown where we live.
Freehold Borough.
Okay.
And,
I see.
As we moved into the space, like we always wanted to have like a bit of a pop-up retail presence, and we weren't sure exactly what that might look like, and we landed on Borough Records as this concept that will be a bit of a curated selection of vinyl that we're bringing in that are not from the labels at all. We will also have label artists represented there, but it will be a home to vinyl. I mean, vinyl, CDs, cassettes, some of it will be used, but again, curated. And then the merch aspect and bringing in some, like third-party makers and things like that to try and create this cool vibe. And the idea is to have a space in town that, one, is a part of the community, so it's just fostering that. There's a lot of kids here. It's a bustling downtown. There's a lot of businesses, restaurants, people come for that. But the town also needs some retail, and it needs some interesting like arts presence. And we feel like what we are doing or what we're envisioning is going to be kind of this door opener for more.
Absolutely. Well, it has the same it has the same halo effect that the merch it will have. You can do events. It's a literal billboard on the front of the street. There's so many ways that it can benefit you more than just cash register making money.
Yeah, and there's a lot of music history in this town as well. I mean, Bruce Springsteen grew up here. There's this huge buzz around Bruce all the time. I mean, literally on this next block, there's going to be a Bruce Springsteen museum. They were just filming the Bruce Springsteen biopic here in downtown with Jeremy Allen White, Delivered Me from Nowhere to Nowhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the whole downtown was closed off and crowds and I think like we're open online now. If you go to boroughrecords.com, we're starting to sort of accumulate, records, to actually sell in person. But it's funny. It's like the mayor's aware that we're doing this. The council people are aware that we're doing this, and they're all running around wearing Borough Records sweatshirts. And everybody's like, "When are you going to be opening?"
That's awesome.
We're not taking our time, but we are being patient. And what we didn't want to have happen is we open a store and then we start to build the excitement around it. Yeah. We're building the excitement around it so that when we open the store, there's 100 people in line to get it.
That's right. That's awesome.
That's kind of where we're at right now. We're hoping that comes true next month.
It sounds to me that's highly curated. So the records in the store, I imagine, will stay within the kind of the genres or just adjacent to that sound, or will you say no? Here's where you come to get the new Taylor Swift on vinyl.
I mean, it's going to be curated, but there will definitely be an element of like, we want people releases. To be able to buy new records that are very popular, that they're super excited about with us. Yeah. And it won't be everything, but it will be some things. And I mean, I think a lot of people probably look at Vincent and I and the labels that we've created and think that we have very specific taste in music. And like, that's where you're going to get if you like come to the house and we put a record on. We listen to so much stuff, and it's like wild spans with genres. So it's just like
the new Weekend record dropped this week, and we were just listening to it constantly.
Like it's just been on repeat.
And we would bring that in. We'd have the new Weekend record on vinyl.
Okay, that's cool. Because I mean, there's a fine line of actually being highly curated, which I think is really important because it makes for a really specific shop. But at the same time, it can be a bit pretentious when a young kid comes in and says, "Hey, I want the new Weekend record." Oh, you don't have? Oh, we don't sell that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's.
I'll tell you where I want to be highly curated is with the used stuff because. Okay. There's so many stores you walk into and it's just like full of like just records nobody wants. Yeah. And like stuff from the 70s that they made millions of copies of that you could like scratch. So like for me it's like if somebody walks in and wants to sell me like a 200 this is a true story, just happened. I just bought a 200 CD hip hop collection that's like immaculate. It's amazing. All the Death Row stuff, like all like Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, huge hip hop collection. And like, sure, will I put that out? Absolutely. But like, if somebody walks in and wants to sell me a ton of like, Bon Jovi CDs, nothing against Bon Jovi, but like, I don't,
Chumbawamba.
Literally boxes of records get dropped off on our porch by neighbors because they were like, oh, I know you have the shop opening. Like,
that's sweet of them. That's sweet.
I think I want to sell stuff that's like, maybe difficult to find because I'll tell you, and not in the sense that it's like scarce, But like, I'll tell you, like, there's so many times when like I just want, like, here's another example. There's this band from France, I believe. They're called Tokyo Tea Room.
Okay.
Yeah.
And really like the record. And it's funny because if you go on their Spotify, it's like, whoa, 1.2 million monthly listeners. They must be a big band, right? Like their label pressed 300 copies of the record. And like, you know, they have 7,000 Instagram followers. So they're not a big band. They just happen to have a nice Spotify following. And I'm like obsessed with getting these records in because like, I know I want it. Yeah. And I know there's probably people in the USA that want it that can't get it. So like I want to get it and make it available to 25 people in the US that can't get it. So that's like what drives me.
I see.
Yeah.
And it's nice when record stores, I mean, I love record stores. I love all the different types of record stores, but there are some record stores that are, you know, hundreds of thousands of records. You're right. Probably 75% of them will never move. And you know, and I do love digging through those stores. At the same time, sometimes I want to go into a store where there's 6 records on the wall and I've never heard of them at all. And probably any one of them I would love, you know, because the record store owner has sought them out. And that's an experience. I think that experience is rare today in record stores.
Well, you want to have like the opportunity to visit a record store that is very much going to be like a tastemaker experience. And
that's right.
I think that that's what Borough Record, that's a big part of what we want to do. You know, also not take away from the fact that like there are going to be younger kids that want to come in and they want something that's current, and it might be a little bit outside of the specific genres that we've curated before. It won't be everything, but
the thing is, like, my mom used to always say to me, like, she tells me, you know, when you were a kid, if you love something, you would like show it to everybody. And if somebody really liked it, you would just give it to them. Oh, and she would get frustrated with me because I would like give my toys away.
He still does it.
And yeah, I probably still do.
You do. We're at DJ gigs and like stuff. And like if it's one of our records, it's obviously not a big deal. Like we can do that. But yeah, he's 100%. Like we'll be there and like someone comes up and like, I love this. And it's like, you know what? Take it. Oh my gosh. You know, there's a thing called Shazam, you know, Vincent. Just let them Shazam it.
That's what this store is going to like serve for me is like I might not give everything away because we have to like pay the rent.
I need to make
but like you know, I obsessively make playlists on Spotify of like music that I'm currently listening to, and like I wish they had way more listeners than they do. But it's like I just love the idea of like sharing what I like, you know, because I know it makes me feel a certain way, so I'm hoping it'll make somebody I know feel a certain way. So like that's the whole spirit of Borough, is like just somebody discovering something cool that, you know, maybe I help them discover, or we help
I think that's the foundation of record labels.
Say that again?
Sorry, I just think that's the foundation of record label people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
Do you remember were you like an early subscriber with Spotify?
Maybe no. I go back to, I mean, Canada was a little delayed, but maybe 2014, 2015 was when I kind of started.
So you might have seen this then.
Okay.
There used to be a feature where you could actually, you could like send a message to someone. So you could share
like an inbox feature.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could share music.
Vaguely remember that.
So when Vincent and I were first dating, that was like something that we would do because we would like, we couldn't always hang out. It was like we were, you know, work schedules weird, but we would always be sending each other new songs. It was like, I think you would like this, or like this made me think of you. Or,
oh, that's nice.
And it was just so that's like even the beginning of our relationship was like always surrounded by just sharing music with each other and just like hoping that like the other would enjoy it as much as we did.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So I think that that's kind of like that's a trend that we're carrying on, and we want to try and have that space here.
It's a real it's a common thread, I think, in people in the music industry, because label owners, for sure, that's really, wanting to share great music with people. Record store owners too, I think, to a certain extent, but also artists. I mean, as a person who makes music, I think what I'm trying to do when I make an album is give people that feeling that I get when I fall in love with an album. It's just it's like a kid who runs around and pretends to be Spider-Man after watching Spider-Man. When I hear a great album, I feel like I need to make a great album to show people. It's just an interesting.
Emotional.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a really good friend that's a chef, and it's like he gets inspired by food. Gotta make it.
He wants to share it. He wants you to come over. He wants to.
We get invites all the time. I just got a great deal on this. Like, come over on Sunday. I'm making this crazy thing. And we're like, it's any passion is like that. You want to share it.
That is so true.
We just happen to be in this music world, and I've been doing it as long as I can remember. Magda's, her family is huge into music, and it's just it's a part of who we are. So,
Guys, this has been so much fun. I could talk to you all day long. I'm starting to get hungry, but I want to ask you. One more question, and it's probably
what are you having for lunch.
I've already had lunch, but it's now snack time.
Dinner at 2:00 in the afternoon.
No, it's like snack time, like some popcorn or pretzels or something. Yeah.
All right.
Like, what do you? This is an impossible question, so I apologize in advance. Take all the time you need. What do you think has made you guys so successful? And maybe you don't consider yourself to be successful. There's a lot of labels who are listening now and are envious of the fact that you have a massive catalog. You have people buying glassware from you. You're opening a record store. There's just what you guys have done is not common for record labels who have only been around for 8 or 9 years. It's not common for people who've been around for 18 or 19 years. It's very hard to do, yet somehow you've carved out this audience and you're serving them well and you're making great products. I'm just wondering, like how'd you do it? What's your secret?
There isn't a secret. Sorry, everyone.
That's too
bad. There is always work to be done. And I think that probably one of the biggest drivers and also challenges at the same time is that the music industry is constantly changing. And as frustrating as that can be, I think it also pushes us to think outside the box. And as a result, we grow and we get better at what we're doing and we learn a lot. And we make mistakes and we learn from those mistakes. But I don't know, every day we're going on a walk with our dog and we're talking about something that we need to do differently with the band or something we need to do differently with the way we're pitching a record or so I'm not sure there's an answer to that, but I think that you need to make sure you're enjoying it. There's going to be frustrating moments, and I think that we're in a lot of those right now because there's growing pains. And especially with wanting to open a record store, there's 1,000,001 pieces. But I do think that just committing to what you believe in with your label, what your sound is, what your look is part of what's made us have the success that we've had. And I think we're going to just stick to those guns. We just, we know what's worked really well.
Was there a year where things started taking off? Was there a time where you're within the first release or the first couple of months, or did it take 2 year 3 year 4 to say, hey, this is working? Well,
I think that one secret
here we go.
I think one secret is that I don't think that we could be doing what we're doing if we didn't sort of focus on plugging into a community. And
that's a good point.
Again, our label came after we were doing an event in our town, and we were taking a lot of risk, and we were creating this surf music event because we wanted to go to Italy to the biggest one in the world, and we couldn't go because we couldn't afford it, so we just made our own in Asbury Park. So we created this little community, and then it was after that community existed, then that's when when we put records out into the world, that community responded by supporting us.
Right.
And then we just continued to expand the community. We finally made our way to that Italian event. We met a bunch more people. And then, we go to Florida, we go to the Hukilau. And 2 years ago, we went to Mexico City and met, Tito Ramirez and Jason Joshua at Latinos Con Sol. And we met more people there. So I think like as easy as it is to just kind of like think like, all right, I'm going to just put myself out there on the internet. Like the real world still is important, that you're out there plugging into the community.
So when you say community, are we talking local New Jersey, the scene community, or are you talking the genre community?
Both. You know, the surf music thing like didn't really exist in New Jersey. Like we are well known as like sort of like the crazy surf music people in New Jersey. That's just how people know us. Like, oh yeah, High Tide. They do this. They do that surf rock thing. That's us. Yeah. But like we found other communities like through events and through bands, and we went there. You know, like we got on a plane and we went to these places, and you know, we met the people that were also interested in it. And, you know, we sort of like, we built a community local, but we also plugged into the larger one globally.
Right.
And that's kind of like what we're working on replicating with New Tone and with the record store. It's like, you know, we want to create this little local community, but also like, you know, plug into the bigger one that's happening globally in that space as well.
And probably the biggest thing to remember with the community piece is that sometimes it doesn't exist yet and you have to create it.
Oh, wow.
And that's hard, but it is like how it's going to be how you build the foundation to like, you know, go from there.
Yeah. So. Wow. That's incredible. What great advice. Guys, I love what you've done. I love your artwork. I love the vinyl. I love everything. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with our audience. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, I know you probably get a lot of, you know, interest in, you know, joining the podcast. So we appreciate that you,
of course,
you know, saw maybe something special in what we're doing. So it means a lot.
Thank you all for listening. Go to hightiderecordings.com. I hope you were doing that while we were chatting, because there's so many visuals we talked about. Also, New Tone is spelled NU-tone. You can find out about both these labels by going to hightiderecordings.com. Thanks to them for being on the show. And thanks to our friends at Groover for making this episode and all of our episodes all month long possible. Go to groover.co to learn more and click the link in the description below to save on your next Groover campaign. Thanks for listening.